Hey there, everybody. Welcome in to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. Find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. It's time to recap all the craziness that was Week 13 in the NFL. Here to do that with me is, of course, Pat Fitzmaurice. Find him on Twitter at Fitz_FF. Pat, how was your Week 13?
Hello, Dan. It was actually a really good week. Lucky number 13, maybe the best of the season as far as the combination of bets, winning fantasy games. I needed to win. Definitely had some must-win games in the Scott Fish Bowl, a couple of my home leagues, and I think I'm going to get a clean sweep of the games I needed. So it reversed a series of pretty bad weeks. So I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm in a good mood for a change.
I did not fare as well. I had a lot of must-win games. None of them were wins. I am sort of hoping and pinning my hopes on the fact that, like, maybe if other teams lose enough, I might be able to sneak in sort of here. But it was a long Sunday for me in that sense. But again, as I used to talk about with tags, I get much more invested in my calls and the advice that I give out. And I know you and I were talking about that and how terrible we feel when we say start X guy over Y guy and it doesn't work out. But I felt like today was like a pretty decent day with calls, right? We were talking about it. I felt pretty good with the advice given out.
Yeah, last week was just catastrophic with how many people I led astray. I don't know about you, but this week was definitely a lot better. Told some people to start TJ Hawkinson. And yeah, we were talking about the Hawkinson versus Foster Moreau. We can get into that more, but
Yeah, we will. Foster Moreau is definitely somebody who I thought would have a better day. Luckily, again, I was Thanksgiving last week. I was driving back. Yates took my IG live. I got to take off the time of giving people poor fantasy advice, but I was glad to come back and do it this week. All right, we got to get to all the games. We got to move like lightning. So before we do, let me do a couple of housekeeping matters. The first is to remind you that we're giving away a signed Alvin Kamara jersey. Of course, look, this is the home stretch of the podcast. If you listen to this podcast and you haven't left a review, this is a really easy way to just show some support because we're going to keep doing this until the end of the season here. Just leave a review for the show would be great. But we have changed the way that we do the giveaways, just so you know. It's now just subscribing to our YouTube channel. That's it. Okay, so just subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros and then go to fantasypros.com/contest. That's all you need to do to be entered to win the Alvin Kamara signed jersey. Super easy, and you get great content from our YouTube channel. Also, if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I do the Kickoff podcast every single weekday morning. After we are done here, I'm going to write and record it. This will be my 5 biggest takeaways. I'll do waiver wires. I'll do my early difference rankings with mean consensus each week. It's a lot of good information if you value what I say, which if you're listening to this, I hope you do at least mildly. All right, Pat, trust or bust. Are you ready to get into it, sir?
Let's do it, Dan. Who are you going to hit me with?
All right, let's start trust or bust with Russell Gage. Matt Ryan threw for 297 yards. 130 of them went to Gage. 12 targets, catches 11 of them for 130 yards. Now, he did lose that fumble, but he's got 27 targets now, Pat, over the last 3 games. What do you think here, Russell Gage, trust or bust?
Oh, man. So my 14-year-old son's pretty upset with me because I recommended Darius Slayton over Russell Gage to him today. I don't think this would have cost him victory, though his team did pretty poorly. So it wouldn't have mattered, but he still rubbed that in my face a lot. And I'm still inclined to not trust Russell Gage, Dan. I've just seen the way the Falcons offense operate. And so many times Matt Ryan is just sitting there in the pocket, like scanning the field and not finding anyone open. The season schedule the rest of the way for Atlanta. There are no real favorable matchups. I mean, it's kind of neutral. It's the Panthers, 49ers, Lions, Buffalo. You're definitely not starting him against Buffalo in championship week. Right. You know, maybe Detroit, their pass defense is bad, but it's kind of a run funnel defense. So I don't know. I cannot get into Russell Gage, and we know he's given us those 2 zeros. 2 zeros in his last, I believe, 5 games where he just didn't show up at all. Either 5 or 6 games.
I'm looking at your rest of season rankings now, and I hadn't looked at this before. We were just talking about him. I mean, we were both fading him, obviously, rest of season. You had him 62nd, Pat. Yeah. Do you recall where roughly you had him ranked this week? Because I felt like I recommended him to a few people, and I felt a little sheepish about it, right? And that was probably at like wide receiver 35 or something like that. Because it did strike me as something where they would have trouble running, even though randomly Mike Davis scores a rushing touchdown today, and Cordero Patterson looked good on the ground. But I thought obviously he might get the targets here. Didn't expect this quite good game, but how are you feeling about him coming into this week, just for this week only?
I think I had him somewhere around 50, give or take.
Okay.
So if
All right.
people were looking at my rankings, they did not start Russell Gage and did not get that big game. So
Well, I do agree with you that it is bust going forward, though. And again, at this point, Pat, we are entering week 14. That is usually the week of the fantasy playoffs. This year, it's one more week of the regular season, I expect, for most people. So we've got 4 weeks left in the entire season for fantasy. And that is a time where schedules are really just absolutely critical. And like you said, he does not have the schedule that you want to see going forward if you're looking to get the most out of somebody like Russell Gage. But let me ask you about another receiver, Pat. A guy who I really liked early in the season, was a reliable producer, then was on injured reserve with the injury, comes back here in his first game. That's Devontae Parker. Sees 5 targets, catches all of them, 62 yards. Those 5 targets that he saw represented the fewest that he has seen in a game this year. He had not seen fewer than 7 at all when he had been healthy. He still now has at least 4 catches in every single game this season. They've got a bye, obviously, so you can factor that in. But generally speaking, rest of season, when the Dolphins play, Devontae Parker, trust or bust?
trust, because unlike Russell Gage, I actually believe in Devontae Parker's talent. And the schedule is pretty favorable once he gets back from the bye with the Jets, who, no offense, Dan, have some troubles with pass coverage, as we've
Fair.
seen before.
Yep.
And the Saints, who I think have given up the second most fantasy points per game to receivers in the league. So, and then the Titans in the final week. So any of those are pretty favorable matchups. And, Parker is a quality player. And I think, we've seen Waddle turn into kind of a short area receiver. So really the downfield targets for Tua in this offense are Parker and Mike Gesicki, oddly enough. Yeah. So I would trust him. He's not going to, you're not playing him over some of the high quality dudes in the league. Like, he's a wide receiver 3 flex guy.
Sure.
But I think you could trust him in that, supporting role.
Pat, we'll talk about this later, but a guy who I got a million questions about today was like Rashad Bateman. And that's a guy who's always been in that area, right? Like the guy who people are like, oh, maybe you get to that area, man. You give me a guy like Devontae Parker, who I don't really care about the ceiling. Give me that floor each and every week. I am more than happy to buy into it. So he is a trust for me. I agree with you, because this entire season, he has not fully let you down once, and not that many receivers in that range can say that. But let's get to the next one, Pat. Your favorite, my favorite. It is, I am confused by your opinion, sir. I am confused by your opinion on Antonio Gibson. Now, I feel like we've mentioned him before, Pat. You had him 19th in your rest of season rankings. And again, you and I were joking a little bit, Pat, before we got on about, we were talking about like what we did with Sony Michel when we knew Darrell Henderson would be active, right? So we basically had them almost exactly at the same spot. And I just feel like that's indicative of the fact that you and I approach things oftentimes very similarly. So when I look at our rest of season rankings, they're often very similar. But Gibson, Pat, I had 10th rest of season. You had 19th. So you were really fading him compared to what I was doing. 26, 19, and 36 touches since they came off the bye. Now he has 23 carries for 88 yards on the ground, 6 targets, 5 catches, 23 yards with the touchdown through the air. I realized there was no J.D. McKissick, but still, he's been heavily involved here, Pat, since the bye. This strikes me as a top 12 running back. So I ask you, or I say to you rather, I am confused by your opinion on Antonio Gibson, sir.
I did have him ranked too low rest of season, Dan. Yeah, he's going to be moving up. I guess my concern was the games we've seen with J.D. McKissick getting into that certain game script where there's like a lot of hurry up offense. And we've seen Gibson just have some kind of dud games as a result of like the J.D. McKissick scripts. And it's happened before, although it has not happened of late. Maybe I shouldn't be as concerned about that, because we've kind of seen them put a new emphasis on Gibson ever since the bye. I don't know if his shin was feeling better. I don't think the stress fracture in his shin would have healed during a 1-week bye, but ever since he came out of it, he's been like a new man, getting a great workload. And, McKissick out, we don't know his status, concussion, but I think there might also be like a neck component to it. So yeah, if McKissick's out, like Gibson is into running back 1 range for a week. But even if McKissick is around, like he deserves to be, Gibson deserves to be like a high end RB2.
I mean, I think really what happened is, as long as I don't think that the type of injury is one that is really going to get worse necessarily by him playing through it. It's really just something where it doesn't fully heal until he gets rest. And I realized like I kind of faded him initially because I said, well, if he's not going to get better without rest, like how can I feel that he's going to get better on the field? But the team just decided basically like their defense is playing better, despite all their injuries, and their games are close, and they know that their fortunes are better when they feed him the ball as opposed to just letting Taylor Heineke run the show.
Yes.
And so with that volume, I mean, with or without McKissick, I feel like this is a top 12 back now. And again, they've got Dallas, they've got Philadelphia, they've got Dallas, they've got Philadelphia. Those are the next four matchups. They could get blown out by Dallas, but with the way their offense is playing right now, I think those games are going to stay relatively close, and I think that that's going to mean a lot of Antonio Gibson. So
yeah, and they're using this former college receiver in the passing game. Finally giving him that passing game usage that we craved.
yeah,
All early season he was getting two targets a game, and now he's seeing 5 or 6 a week, which is really nice.
Yeah, seemed like we were all expected that to happen, and the fact that it wasn't was mind-boggling, but it is now. All right, Pat, let's get into the games from Sunday. Let's start with the Colts 31, Texans 0. I feel like this was exactly kind of, Pat, what we expected from the Colts, and from the Texans, but really from the Colts. Jonathan Taylor just takes a monster workload, 32 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Carson Wentz throws for just 158. And this was something I was saying when people were asking about it because of the matchups. I said, there's a strong possibility they're just going to blow it out and not need to throw a ton. His 1 touchdown goes to Ashton Dulin. Michael Pittman Jr., 8 targets and 22 pass attempts. So that's really nice. Catches 6 for 77. He has a couple of runs for 33 yards. I don't know, Pat, really for me, not much to say about the Colts. This is exactly what I expected. I feel the exact same way about pretty much every single player that I did before this got in.
I'll say 2 things about the Colts, Dan. First, hear the Carson Wentz number of passing attempts in Colts wins this year. 32, 20, 26, 30, 34, 20, 22. So that works out to 26.3 attempts per game in their wins. And like he's been much more productive in their losses. And their next games after the bye against the Patriots and at the Cardinals. And so you would almost think like, boy, those are some pretty tough matchups. I almost want to see the tough matchups for Carson Wentz so they won't be able to run the ball 40 times or whatever. I mean, maybe it's a little less favorable for Jonathan Taylor. The other guy we're happy about the wins for him. He is making some serious hay in the Colts wins. And the other point I wanted to make, Dan, was like Michael Pittman looked fabulous today, and I don't think the numbers fully reflect it. Just, running reverses to him that worked for big gains, just high pointing balls, like boxing out guys on these tough contest. Like he made 3 or 4 just really tough catches today and just used his physicality and his athleticism today to full advantage. Really impressive.
Yeah, he's awesome. And it's one of the many reasons that I hate fading him, basically, which I do routinely. And again, I had him ranked, I don't know where I had him ranked this week, like 15th or 16th. Like I wasn't fading him this week. But generally speaking, I am just because of the lack of targets. What was great here is the number of targets that he got here, considering the few pass attempts and the fact that I got him involved in the running game. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, that's it. You nailed it. I mean, 22 pass attempts, and for him to still have an impactful game around 100 yards, like really impressive considering the way the game script went.
Extremely encouraging for sure. For the Texans, everything is bad. No David Johnson here, so Rex Burkhead carries the load, which meant 9 touches for 45 yards. Tyrod Taylor hyperextended his wrist apparently after throwing for just 45 yards. It was not good. Again, Brandon Cooks, 54 total yards because he had a rush attempt. He had 3 catches. I don't know, man. I mean, we say it every week, Pat, with the Texans. I mean, I guess we continue. You had him 27th, Cooks. I had him 29th the rest of season. I guess that's kind of around where he stays, maybe drops a few spots, and you start him as like a borderline wide receiver 3 flex option.
Yep, that's it. I think he's down into flex territory from, his high point of wide receiver 2 earlier in the season.
Yeah. It really stinks. I love Brandon Cooks, and I've been impressed with what he was able to do early on, but right now it's no good. All right, before we get to the next game, let me tell you about Organifi and how to improve yourself. So Organifi is a line of organic superfood blends that offer plant-based nutrition made with high-quality ingredients. Each Organifi blend is a science-backed to craft the most effective doses with ingredients that are both organic and free of fillers. They contain less than 3 grams of sugar per serving. They get a bunch of different blends. The Organifi green juice is pretty awesome. That's the one that my wife likes in particular. That helps reduce stress and support healthy cortisol levels with its essential superfoods. They've also got Organifi Gold. That's a superfood tea that supports rest and relaxation so you can wake up feeling refreshed. They're all incredibly, incredibly easy to use. All you do is you mix it with water or your favorite beverage, and they don't compromise quality for taste whatsoever. They take pride in offering the best tasting superfood products on the market. It's less than $3 per day. Go to Organifi.com/FantasyPros. Use code FantasyPros for 20% off your first order. That's Organifi.com/FantasyPros. Use code FantasyPros for 20% off any item. All right, let's get to the next game. Pat, let's go to the Lions 29, Vikings 27. Really great to see the Lions get that victory. I love the video of Dan Campbell going nuts. Just a really nice moment for that team. Jamal Williams, I mean, he's not terrible, but, disappointing. 17 for 71 on the ground and just the one catch for 9 yards. That continues, Pat, what we have seen here with Campbell calling the plays, where the running back is no longer sort of the featured role in the passing game. Jared Goff does throw for 296, 3 touchdowns. One goes to TJ Hawkinson, who we both recommended, thankfully, over a bunch of guys. He has 49 yards receiving, 1 to Brock Wright, and the game winner to Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 targets, caught 10 of them for 86 yards. Josh Reynolds, again, involved, 7 targets, 4 catches, 69 yards. He had 70 yards in the last game. So I guess let's start with Williams. I imagine you're going to start Jamal Williams as an RB2 so long as Swift is out. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, Dan Campbell hasn't been drawing up a lot of plays for the running backs to catch passes, but that's certainly something Jamal Williams is capable of. So he could easily have 3 or 4 catches in any game where he's playing this many snaps.
Yeah, right. He obviously showed that ability when he was in Green Bay. How about St. Brown or Reynolds? Any interest whatsoever in either guy?
Yeah, so Brown, I mean, he's capable of these games where he gets a bunch of catches, but there's not much splash play potential there, and we just know there isn't a lot of touchdown potential with Detroit. I kind of I don't know, everyone else was higher on Josh Reynolds than I was this week, Dan. And I'm sure you were higher on him in the rankings this week. And I was just looking at it, and I know there was the narrative about Goff and Reynolds having played together on the Rams. I just decided I didn't want to wade into the Detroit wide receiver pool. And, it turned out to be, he had a better day today than I thought he was going to have. It wasn't a day you'd be excited about if you had him in your lineup, but it keeps us interested in him, I guess, as a possible guy. And I have a feeling he's going to be in a lot of the start-sit questions we get for week 14.
Yeah, Denver next, then Arizona after that. And again, I really expected Minnesota to finally break their streak of underachieving, basically, and not have a game decided by 3 points. But again, they lost Adam Thielen, which we'll talk about in a second. So I thought basically Detroit would probably need to throw a little bit. I thought Reynolds would be one of the primary beneficiaries. Minnesota's pretty good against tight ends, although, again, I still thought Hawkinson would be fine. So that's a little bit of why I had Reynolds probably where I did. Again, we talk about it. I don't look where I am versus consensus because I don't want to ruin my day if I have been incorrect on somebody. But yeah, I agree. It's not somebody who I'm looking at really going forward. I think there are other options. For the Vikings, I mentioned Adam Thielen left early with a sprained ankle. Don't know of the severity yet. I believe they have a Thursday night game against Pittsburgh coming up, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be a tough turnaround for him. Justin Jefferson does go a little crazy. One of my favorite props that I gave out on our Friday live stream was Justin Jefferson. Then I think it was 82.5 yards. I just felt like since the squeaky wheel game, Pat, he's just been targeted nonstop. 14 targets here, 11 catches, 182 yards with the touchdown. Tyler Conklin, 9 targets, 7 catches, 56 yards. KJ Osborne, 7 targets, 4 catches, 47 yards with the touchdown. So, Kirk Cousins threw for 340 and the 2 touchdowns. And with the short turnaround here, Pat, if Thielen can't go, I mean, do you have interest in either Conklin or KJ Osborne? Because the ball's got to go somewhere here.
Both, yes. I generally don't think that Conklin he's definitely not on the tight end 1 level. And I feel like there are some better high end tight end 2s than him. Like, I just don't feel like he is a great pure pass catcher, but with this Thielen injury, like, he's going to get targets as a result of this. And this does make him like a viable high end tight end 2 for next week. And KJ Osborne, yes. Like,
yeah.
What did he wind up with for targets today? Was it 7?
I had it 7. Yeah.
So he's going to get a lot more action. He was prominently a part of this offense early in the season, kind of faded as the target tree narrowed a little bit. But a Thielen injury would definitely make him viable again as a fantasy option for week 14.
Yeah, once upon a time we talked about him as, hey, could this be something in the beginning of the year? But there just wasn't room. But without Thielen, and again, we have commenters here. We are live streaming this, everybody, so you know. So always come by if you want at 9 p.m. Eastern. Pat and I are here. So I have commenters saying that it's actually a high ankle for Thielen. So that's something that would keep him out. Now, again, I haven't seen that yet. It's just One Rock, the commenter. Hello, One Rock. Thank you for stopping by, saying it's a high ankle. If it is, I mean, obviously won't be back Thursday, but we'll see about that. But Justin Jefferson, target share to the moon if it can get any higher. So, man, it's going to be incredible. Meanwhile, Alexander Mattison does come through, 25 touches, 124 yards with the touchdown. He is a must-start option without Dalvin Cook. Of course, Pat, I don't think we need, unless you want, I don't think there's any need to say about anything about Mattison, right?
No, pretty much a 1-for-1 replacement for Dalvin Cook.
It was great to see. Dolphins 20, Giants 9. We already talked about Parker, but Jalen Waddle continues to bring an incredibly safe floor. You mentioned sort of his short area targets, but 11 targets, 9 catches, 90 yards. He did leave the game briefly with cramps, but obviously nothing to worry about. He's just incredibly safe. Good to see Mike Gesicki as well, Pat. Get at least, 11 targets is fantastic. 7 catches, 46 yards. Myles Gaskin, his usual inefficient self, 15 carries, 44 yards. It's like clockwork with this, 2.5 yards per carry here. 2 catches on 2 targets for 5 yards. 2 throws for 2 touchdowns. They go to Matt Collins and Isaiah Ford, who combine for 7 yards receiving. Again, it was good to see Parker get back. I don't know, Pat, anything really stick out to you? For me, I was just really, good to see Waddle continue to get it done. Good to see the target share for Gesicki. And, Myles Gaskin, somebody who I feel like we continue to start and should just because of the guaranteed volume, but it's unexciting.
Yeah, the running game just doesn't work because the offensive line can't block anyone. And the passing game, maybe as a result of that running game, like I give the Miami passing game and Tua credit because they are not getting into favorable down and distance situations when they run on early downs. Like they're facing a lot of 2nd 9, 2nd and 8s if they attempt to run the ball early in the series. And they're not explosive, but they're efficient. And, Tua's got a reasonable floor. Waddle, you talked about his floor. Like there are a lot of decent floor plays here. Gesicki's kind of been up and down. But yeah, there's really not much to say about this offense. What do you do with Gaskin? Low ends running back 2?
Well, we'll start him, right? They got to buy. We're going to wind up saying you should. We'll answer a lot of start-sit questions on that Sunday morning, Pat, in Week 15, where people are saying, do I start Gaskin? And he's going up against the Jets, and we'll probably say yes in that instance. But the following week, when they take on New Orleans, that'll be our excuse, I think, to run it far, far away from him.
I'm glad these matchups are going to be dictating our answers.
Correct.
That
There's
makes it easy.
Nothing we can do about it, Pat. We are locked in based on the pure numbers of the opponents. All right, let's go to the Giants. So obviously a little tough to really read anything into because it was Mike Glennon, but this could be what we're looking at for a while. We don't know how Daniel Jones's neck injury, how long that's going to keep him out. He wasn't good as expected, obviously. 23 of 44 for 187 yards with the pick. Evan Ingram was your leading receiver with 5 targets, 4 catches, 61 yards. Kenny Golladay, 5 targets, 3 catches, 37 yards. He was a little in and out with a rib injury, so we'll have to monitor that. Saquon Barkley, Pat, on the ground, 11 carries, 55 yards. I mean, that's a good yards per carry number. 9 targets, 6 catches, just 19 yards. That doesn't kill you, but Pat, I have a real hard time evaluating Saquon Barkley because I feel like I see these glimpses and it makes me really excited, but ultimately he's not really producing for fantasy, And
he doesn't look that fluid in the passing game. That used to be one of his hallmarks, and we just haven't seen that this year. And it just kind of concerns me, Dan. Like, I don't know if this is going to be something that looks better next year when he's had a full off season of rest and recovery time. I know his, body was still recovering from the major injury last year, but yeah, we just have not seen the old Saquon explosiveness. I'm concerned.
Now they do face the Chargers next week. So, Joe Mixon didn't have sort of the blow up day kind of that I think most people expected necessarily, but it's obviously been one of the better, matchups for running back. So, and again, I assume, Pat, you'll still start Saquon Barkley going forward, right? Like,
Yeah,
you have to.
We're going to have him no worse than in mid running back 2 range against the Chargers in a good running game matchup.
Yep. All right. I agree. I just wanted confirmation that I'm not insane. Before we go on to the next game, we can be real. It is the end of week 13. A lot of fantasy seasons are pretty much over. I know that I was knocked out of the playoffs in one of my leagues, absent the greatest Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs combination game of all time tomorrow, which is okay because I know that I can continue to play on FanDuel. All right. So on FanDuel, you sign up through FanDuel.com/FP. And this is a great deal. So I want you to listen. FanDuel.com/FP. You get a free 6-month subscription to FantasyPros. And FanDuel is going to give you a 20% deposit match up to $500 on your first deposit. That is actually a way to make money just by signing up for FanDuel. And you can make money by playing on FanDuel. That's obviously the easiest way. Set a new lineup every contest, play in the main slate, play on single game, play best ball, do a snake draft, do whatever you want. Play private contests with your friends if you're more comfortable with that. Experience season-long wins without the season-long waits. Just sign up for FanDuel, receive a 20% deposit bonus, up to $500 with a free 6-month subscription to Fantasy Pros. Just head again to FanDuel.com/FP. Age and location restrictions apply. Bonus is issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires after 30 days. All right, Pat, let's get on to the next game. And I will say that everybody in the chat is asking about Darrell Henderson and what this means going forward, given how good Sonny Michel. I promise you, we will answer that question. We will get there when we get to the game. So stick around with us. We've got 135 people here with us right now. Stick around. By the way, drop a like if you're here watching this here live. That helps us out as well. Let's get to the Bucs 30, Falcons 17. Tom Brady throws for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. Felt like all of his pass attempts went to Chris Godwin, but it was actually just 17 of them. He catches 15 for 143. Mike Evans with a nice game, 10 catches, 7 targets, 99 yards. Rob Gronkowski, 8 targets, 4 catches, 58 yards with the 2 touchdowns. Leonard Fournette actually kind of quiet on the ground, 13 for 44. But even in a game where they're ahead the whole time, where they don't need to, go crazy, he's still so involved in the passing game, Pat. 8 targets, 7 catches, 48 yards with the touchdown through the air. The Bucs are just good. And I feel like, Pat, what I kept thinking about was the fact, and they were talking a little bit about it during the game, is what you brought up last week, which is Brady, to his credit, doesn't like getting hit. And when he does get hit, that just makes him more likely to want to get the ball out very quickly and a lot of times dump it off to Leonard Fournette. So if he's going to see these 8 targets, in a game where they're not threatened, they're not playing from behind, I mean, that is just absolutely fantastic going forward, don't you think?
It is, and they just use the dump offs to Fournette as a extension of the running game, which they really didn't even use at all today. I mean, they passed at a 5-to-1 ratio against the run. I think it was something like that. So, and man, just spreading it around between having all of Godwin, Evans, Gronk, and Fournette all just hit big time in the passing game. I mean, even Brates get the touchdown.
Yes.
So, it was Godwin, I think, got hurt after his 11th catch and kind of stayed down on the field. And then 2 minutes later, he had 3 more catches racked up after that. It was just an incredible day for him.
Yeah, a guy at our company messaged me 3 minutes into the game. He's like, am I reading this right? Does Godwin have 5 catches already? And I was like, yes, that's correct. On a very personal level, I will say that I'm so happy that Tom Brady plays for the Bucs because it allows me to appreciate him so much more now that I'm not just rooting against him with every fiber of my being with him being on the Patriots. So this is fantastic to watch. He's not slowing down, and that whole offense is just awesome. Start every piece that you can. For the Falcons, Pat, we already talked about Russell Gage. They run the ball pretty well here against the Bucs. I mean, 13 for 78 on the ground for Cordero Patterson. 5 targets, 3 catches, 18 yards through the air. Mike Davis sighting. Randomly, he scores that rushing touchdown with a really nice run. He has 69 yards total somehow. I assume this doesn't make you interested in Mike Davis going forward, though.
No, but like, let's hope then there was at least someone in America who derived some benefit from that Mike Davis touchdown. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
there was, but maybe someone somewhere was starting Mike Davis in a league.
There's like an NFC South only fantasy league out there, and Mike Davis is borderline rosterable. So I'm sure somebody had him in that one. But yeah, he looked good. It was fun to see as a guy who recommended Davis quite a bit in draft season. It was nice to see that pay off 17 weeks later when nobody is rostering him. Again, we saw Russell Gage get involved. Yates yelled at us, not us, but the community generally, right before lineups, our rankings, when he said, "Oh my God, I just noticed that Kyle Pitts is 5th in expert consensus ranking. That's crazy." And you were kind of like, yeah, I have him 5th as well. That's where he is. 7 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards. So make your case here for Pitts continuing to rank him as an option that high.
Yeah, we've talked about him and the way defenses are really throwing a lot at him and sometimes covering him with their top cornerback. We've seen some of that, which I don't like and almost makes me wish they'd line him up in line more often to get him on safeties and linebackers. But I think the one thing you get with Pitts, and we've seen it this year a couple of times, is those big yardage upside games. Like, he has yardage upside that guys like Logan Thomas simply don't have. So I think that's what you're sort of playing for with him. I think it's going to work better next year when the Falcons have a more credible wide receiver core around him to draw some of the defensive attention away. But yeah, I mean, it does make a point. Like, we haven't seen Pitts click for a while now, and maybe I do need to start dropping him a little lower behind the Dawson Knoxes and the Pat Fryermuths and some of these other guys. I don't know.
There just aren't that many reliable guys anyway, Pat. Like, I don't know even where I had him ranked, but yeah, we both had him 9th rest of season coming into this week. So I hope that's right, by the way. I will say last week I messed up a little bit on my Rob Gronkowski rest of season ranking because I was reading the chart wrong, but it does say here, and I think I'm right, that we both had him 9th. So I think we've dropped them appropriately. I think this was a matchup that you expected them to pass a lot. So, I didn't think it was crazy or anything like that. And again, you mentioned Logan Thomas. I will say that word just broke that Logan Thomas tore his ACL. That was the knee injury. So he is out for the season. And as everybody here who has listened to this for more than a season knows, that is my dude. So I am very, very sad to hear that, unfortunately, but it does sound like Logan Thomas is going to miss the rest of the year. Let's move on to the Eagles 33, Jets 18. No Jalen Hurts in this one. So Gardner Minshew plays very well, 20 of 25, 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick Sirianni has already come out and said, no, it's Jalen Hurts' job. Everyone relax. So let's take him at his word. Both the touchdowns, Pat, went to Dallas Goedert. 6 targets, catches all of them for 105 yards. Devontae Smith, though, Pat, just 4 targets, 2 catches, 15 yards. Do we take anything away from either Goddard's big day or Smith's bad day, given the fact that it was Gardner Minshew, not Jalen Hurts?
It's just sort of the same thing that we've seen from the Eagles for a while now, this emphasis on the running game and the decreased pass volume. And, we saw a shutout game for Dallas Goedert. Was it just last week?
Yep.
And Devonta Smith has popped a couple of times, but then he's had some slow weeks. It's really hard to trust anything in this passing game when the passing volume is so muted. And yeah, I mean, it's going to make both guys uncomfortable starts. They're going to be right. They will be pivot guys. Dan, we're going to be answering start-sit questions on Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, and all the people out there listening, watching. A lot of them are going to have these guys as their dilemma players every week going forward.
Yeah, and again, I was faced with the Goddard versus Knox question today myself. I actually thought Minshew might be a little better for him in this game, but yeah, it's really tough, man. They have to maximize what they're going to get out of these targets, right? Because they're not going to see really more than 6 targets per game. So they really have to maximize it. And when they don't, there is a lot of downside with both of them actually in each and every game. The running game works here. Miles Sanders was great when he was in there, 24 for 120 plus 3 catches for 22 yards. He did injure his ankle. I do not know the severity of it. If you do, or if the people in the chat who know way more than everybody, because we're doing this podcast and they're able to see it, let me know. Kenneth Gainwell, though, then comes in 12 for 54 with the touchdown on the ground, catches all 5 of his targets for 33 yards. Not all of that came after Sanders got injured, but a lot of it did. Boston Scott, no touches. I mean, I know he had been battling the injury. So, Pat, we've got Jordan Howard eventually coming back. How do you see this running game sort of shaking out going forward?
Well, so I think Howard is going to be out until at least week 15. I don't think he's expected back next week. Sanders, who had 24 carries, by the way, career high. I think the previous high
Pat,
for him
to be
was...
clear, they have a bye next week. That's why.
Oh, they do have a bye. Okay,
they have a
sorry
bye.
about that.
No, it's all right.
So Sanders, I saw the play where he got hurt. Like there were a lot of guys gathered around him, so that was kind of bad.
He looked really hurt.
Yeah, and then when they picked him up, like they were kind of helping, like he was leaning on guys, but then he was like, he kind of waved off the guys who were helping him, started walking on it a little better. So, it could be a high ankle sprain, but at least he was able to put pressure on it and, not like badly limping. So the thing is, they actually go 4 deep. Like they've got 4 pretty quality running backs. Gainwell looked good at the end, looked good on that touchdown run where he just kind of went underneath the tacklers and just kind of slithered through and broke into the open. Scott, I guess, only played 3 snaps today. This illness apparently was just too much for him to overcome. So, I mean, like we're interested in whoever is able to answer the bell for week 15, basically.
Let's assume they're all healthy, Pat. What I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it. You'll get to sort of, make your rankings then, but let's say they're all healthy. They're all going to be active. Crazy town. Okay. All 4 of them are active. How would you guess that this would break out? I mean, do you think, I assume that if Sanders were healthy, if you had to choose one guy, it would be Sanders, but it'd probably be somebody who's really kind of like a high-end flex play, probably with all the mouths, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the hierarchy for me, I think, would be Sanders, Scott, Howard, Gainwell, and I think it would be Scott. And that might not even be right because you're looking for someone who would be the passing down back, but maybe they might just go back to Gainwell and they might go back to the early part of the season where Howard and Scott were both irrelevant. So it is a really inscrutable backfield, Dan. I'm not sure what to do with it. I hope Sanders is okay because that was a guy I know a lot of people were patient with all season.
Yeah.
He was finally starting to pay some dividends. So let's hope it's not a high ankle and a multi-week injury.
Yeah, for sure. All right, before we get to the next game, everyone goes to Amazon to shop for their holiday presents. I go to Pristine Auction. And yes, most of my holiday presents that I'm talking about are for me, but I don't care. All I do is I go through items that are on anywhere that I want to check around for. If I'm searching for helmets, I can look for helmets. If I want jerseys, I can look for jerseys. If I want coins for my daughter, that's what I can look for. You can look for every single thing that you want. Now, usually what I do is I go on, I look for items on Pristine Auction, and I just put them on my watch list. That's it. I don't have to do anything. It's just so I know that, hey, this is something I'm interested in. The bidding might end in a day or 2 days. I know I can go back and check. I get an email notification to let me know that items I'm watching, the bidding on them will be ending soon. It's awesome. And if you like sports memorabilia, it's the only place to go. There were 18,593 football items up for auction yesterday. That's nuts. There are almost 10,000 baseball items up for auction. Really, any sort of sports memorabilia you want, Pristine Auction has it, and it is totally free to register and totally free to bid on an item. You only pay something if you win, and because there are so many auctions, you can get things at fantastic prices. Go to pristineauction.com, see for yourself, PRISTINE auction.com. If you want $5 in free credits, just use our code FantasyPros in the registration field when you sign up. They will know we sent you. Again, that's pristineauction.com. Use the code FantasyPros. All right. Oh, actually, I didn't even finish with the Jets. God, I cut us off in the middle of it because we have so much to talk about with this Jets team. Zach Wilson looks good before he kind of reverted to form there as the game went on. 23 of 38 for 226, 2 passing touchdowns, also the rushing touchdown. One of the passing touchdowns goes to Ryan Griffin, who nobody started, but the other one goes to Elijah Moore, who a lot of people were starting. 12 targets, 6 catches, 77 yards. He adds the rush for 9 yards. So obviously we were a little less excited about him when we saw what it looked like with Zach Wilson. Corey Davis aggravated his groin injury again in this game. So how do you feel about Elijah Moore going forward?
Start him every week, especially with the Davis health issue. And it really should have been 2 touchdowns for Elijah Moore. Wilson missed him badly on he was wide open in the corner, missed him. The play before the Ryan Griffin touchdown, next play was the Griffin touchdown. That should have been a second Elijah Moore TD. So I think he was another guy who showed up in a lot of start sit questions this week. Start him. Just start the guy every week. He is special, I think. And even though the quarterback situation does not favor him, at least not this year, I think you want to play him every week.
And certainly with the Davis injury, it does sort of, up his stock a little bit just because there are obviously fewer mouths to feed. The running
game. Do you
game,
agree with that, Dan?
I do. Oh yeah, sure. I do. I mean, look, my guess is, Pat, that probably this week, although I don't know where you ranked him, and I don't recall off the top of my head where I ranked him, although he was a start. And I'm looking at our rest of season rankings. You had him 31st. I had him 33rd. We were in the same range, but my guess is I've probably been just a little less optimistic than you, just because I'm not making long-term projections right now on Zach Wilson, but just watching how he has looked so far this year, I did not expect him to be able to maximize the value of Elijah Moore. But I think the point you are making, and with which I agree, is that Moore's talent almost supersedes sort of all the issues around him, and you just have to get him in your lineup really regardless. And I don't think you're saying as at least like a wide receiver 3 high end. I mean, are you at him 31? Are you pushing him into your top 24 after this, you think, rest of the season?
He's going to be close to that. And I think he was in the weekly rankings this week with 4 teams on bye. I had him like 26 or 27.
Yeah.
So he's probably like, once we bring back those 4 teams, he's probably going to be around that point. I guess I was a little nervous about the Corey Davis return this week, because as you had pointed out, like Zach Wilson has shown that he's very comfortable throwing to Corey Davis.
Yep.
So I wasn't sure what that was going to mean for the target count for Moore.
Yeah.
And now that it looks like probably pretty unlikely that we're going to see Davis next week. So
yes.
I think it's clear runway now for Moore.
Sounds like you're blaming me for you not ranking Elijah Moore high enough, right?
Kind of,
That's fine. Well, I'm pretty sure I had him like 31st or something like that. So I was even lower than you, bastard. Okay. So Tevin Coleman, meanwhile, 14 touches, 77 yards. I don't really want to talk about Jets running back, so we're not going to. Instead, we're going to talk about the Cardinals 33, Bears 22. Kyler Murray attempts just 15 passes, but he scores 4 touchdowns, 2 rushing. As he rushes for 59 yards, that ankle looked fine. 2 passing touchdowns, 1 to DeAndre Hopkins, which the report was he's going to be limited. And again, just 2 targets, catches both of them, 32 yards. But obviously the early touchdown, another one to James Conner, which was really a great play by James Conner. So as someone going up against James Conner, and it's funny, Pat, when I was giving the start sit advice, I kept recommending Conner, obviously, because he was a great start this week. But I kept saying I'm going to be rooting against him because I'm going up against him in a very tough league. And so watching that, I had such mixed emotions because I was like, okay, I'm going to lose this league that I need a must win in. But yay, I realized how high I was on him, and I recommended him to so many people. Brilliant catch. I love it. And that really is what gets to the question, Pat. He totals 111 yards with the score. With Chase Edmonds coming back, maybe next week, I don't know, has Conner just basically earned no longer even a split, just like the dominant share of that the backfield touches?
Yeah. Interesting question. And that was an amazing catch, like sort of a one-armed pirouette on a ball thrown over the wrong shoulder.
I thought he overthrew him when he came out of his hand. I was like, all right, that overthrew him. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really impressive. Good question. So all throughout like September and October, when it was Chase Edmonds and Conner, I was kind of stubbornly ranking Edmonds just ahead of Conner, thinking like that role should be more valuable. And Conner just kept punching in touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. Like, oh man. So then finally we got the Edmonds injury, and I was sort of forced to reckon with the Conner value. And I mean, my gosh, what a valuable workload he's had as a solo artist here. And now with Edmonds back, I think we're going to have to rank Conner significantly ahead of Edmonds. And I don't think we're going to see Edmonds consistently playing a big majority of the early down snaps. It just can't be that way as good as Conner has looked. And when he can make a play like that in the passing game, it shows he is not just a one-dimensional guy. Like, he can do it in all phases. And certainly he's going to be the green zone guy. He is going to be the guy inside the 10 without question. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Edmonds kind of slide into more of like a strict passing down role.
Yeah, the only way Edmonds, I think, is really going to factor in is if they want to limit Connor's workload, because they're going to have the West locked up. That would be my only guess, right? Because other than that, there is nothing close. Like, Connor, it's always really just been about Connor. It's never been his health, Pat. Like, he's a very solid running back. It's just he can never stand up to the huge workload. So I could see them easing him back a little bit as they lock this thing up. But pure talent-wise, you have a game you need to win. I mean, this has got to be like 80-20 Connor right now with Edmonds going forward. He's just been that good and earned that much of a role for sure for me anyway. For the Bears, a ton of Dave Montgomery here, 21 for 90 on the ground with the touchdown, 9 targets, 8 catches, 51 yards through the air. I mean, it was terrible weather, by the way, so nobody was pushing the ball down the field very much. So Jakeem Grant, your leading receiver, 7 targets, 5 catches, 62 yards. Darnell Mooney, 7 targets, 5 catches, 27 yards. I chided you a little bit for ranking him too low. Obviously, he got the targets. General thoughts on Mooney, who, I don't know about you, Pat. Mooney is the guy who, for me, almost always leads the way in these start-sit questions that I get.
Yes, he was in a lot of them this week. And as you mentioned, Dan, the weather was really bad. And I don't think it looked as bad on TV as it actually was here today. I mean, it wasn't gale force winds. It wasn't torrential rain, but there was pretty consistent, like, light drizzle and chill and wind and, not good football or dog walking weather, as I can tell you, Dan. So I think with Mooney, it was part that and partly that Byron Murphy had him locked up pretty well. And I think Murphy is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. And, it looked like he was on Mooney pretty much the entire day and really drilled Mooney with a shot early on. And I wonder if Mooney was like himself the whole rest of the game. I'm not going to suggest he was concussed or anything like that, but I mean, he was definitely rocked by that hit. So, part tough matchup, part bad weather. It was just a good day for the running backs. We saw that all day. And remember when we were talking about Khalil Herbert and how impressive he was, like, earlier in the season, Dan?
Yep.
Like, who was that? Like, he was just, getting David Montgomery's coffee on the sideline today. And
I asked Yates at the time whether he thought Khalil Herbert had earned a role going forward. I probably asked you that too as well, but Yates, especially as the Bears fan, and Yates said no. He said he thought once Montgomery came back, it would just be Montgomery. And it sure is. Meanwhile, Pat, I mean, that is a little bit, I mean, I had him 12th rest of the season. You had him 17th. Are you moving Montgomery up after this or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Wonderful. I like to hear it. Okay. Let's get to the Chargers 41, Bengals 22. Good game here for the Chargers. Justin Herbert throws for 317 and 3 passing touchdowns. 2 go to Keenan Allen, just 34 yards and 5 catches, but the 2 touchdowns obviously outweigh that. 1 goes to Jalen Guyton, which was just kind of I'm going to throw the ball up and let this guy come down with it. And that's exactly what he did. 4 catches for 90 yards. Mike Williams, 7 targets, 5 catches, 110 yards. What do you think about him, Pat? I mean, 15 targets over the last 2 games, 27 through the last 4. Seems like, at least in that area, he's rebounded a bit from that kind of quiet stretch he's had. Not every game has been a winner, obviously, but seems like he's at least getting more involved on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think with 4 more teams on bye next week, he's probably going to be in middle to low end wide receiver 2 range. And that's kind of, I expect him to be right around the 23 to 27 range once everyone's back and it's all 16 teams playing. Just can't fully trust him. He's not the wide receiver 1 he briefly was earlier in the season, but it was nice to see him after a string of duds finally come through for the people who played him.
Yeah. And again, I'm in, we have a FantasyPros internal league, which was 14 teams, and I have Mike Williams, and that's just like a 14-team league with 3 wide receivers. You're starting Mike Williams every week, right? Like, there's no debating it. So it is nice to see him come through as a guy who you just kind of have to leave in your lineup. Meanwhile, Austin Eckler, what I love about Austin Eckler is that a prop bet that I really liked coming into the year, Pat, was Austin Eckler under 6 rushing touchdowns. Because I was like, he never comes close to this. Like, every time they get to, he'll get his touchdowns, but they'll be passing. Now it's just like, oh, you are our goal line back. We are fine with you there. And he does well with it. So kudos to him, who has another rushing touchdown here. 14 carries, 59 yards with a rushing touchdown. Catches all 5 of his targets for 45 yards. He's good. I don't think there's much we need to say about him unless you disagree, Pat.
Well, he had 3 fumbles today, but, other than that, no, it just a total fluke for him that he, didn't have a good grip on the ball at times today, but he's fantastic. So
I wouldn't be too worried. I wouldn't be too worried about him going forward. And he is a guy, thankfully, who I have a lot of shares of because especially in PPR formats where I kept saying, like, he was like my 6th overall pick or something. He has worked out, even though oddly enough, he hasn't been, quite as dominant, like from the, catching passes standpoint as he has been in the past, but so great on the ground. For the Bengals, you expected the big game, Pat, I alluded to earlier from Joe Mixon, 19 for 54 only. Now he does find the end zone that saves his day. He does lose that fumble that kind of turns the whole tide, and he left briefly with the injury, but then he came back. But Joe Burrow throws for 300 yards exactly with the touchdown and 2 picks. He has that finger injury that looked pretty gross as it swelled up. T. Higgins, though, 14 targets, 9 catches, 138 yards in the touchdown. Tyler Boyd, 7 targets, 5 catches, 85 yards. Jamar Chase, 8 targets, 5 catches, 52 yards. There are a few people commenting in the chat right now, Pat, who are very unhappy with what they're seeing from Jamar Chase. Start with T. Higgins, though, before we allude to Chase. 22 targets, 15 catches, 252 yards over the last 2 games. Just talk to me. You can talk to me about Higgins or both Higgins and Chase and just how you're feeling generally about the passing game.
So, yeah, I feel really good about Higgins. I think he's just a terrific player and was not getting his due. And as we had talked about, the guy who was coming up in a lot of start-sit questions with guys who I felt like was, were not on his level. Rashad Bateman, like, why are you debating this? Higgins is really good. He's getting a lot of targets. He's getting targets from a quality quarterback. So we saw it today, and these catches look great. I mean, this was his 2nd straight week with a high point touchdown catch where he had to go high in the air to bring one down. He is a guy you have to start every week. No question.
Any worries here about Chase, who, again, another kind of mediocre game?
Sure. Should we talk about the sequence that most people were upset about? So this is kind of late-ish in the first quarter. I believe it was 9-0 Chargers at the time. Bengals have it deep in their own territory. They have a 3rd and 14, and Burrow throws an absolute dart to T. Higgins to get the first down. Like, Burrow had some really nice throws in this game. There was one he feathered to Tyler Boyd on the sideline where Boyd had Chris Harris trailing him, and then the sideline was coming up, and he put it exactly where he needed to, feathering it over Harris and just giving Boyd enough room to get the 2 feet down. The dart to Higgins, one of the best throws I saw all day for a 21-yard gain. And on the very next play, Burrow hits Chase wide open down the right sideline. I mean, Chase has a touchdown. 2 steps on his. It's going to be a 71-yard touchdown.
Yep.
Not only does Chase not bring it in, but he juggles it and turns it into an interception for the Chargers. So instead of the 71-yard touchdown catch, I mean, if you're a fantasy manager with Burrow on your team, you had to be beside yourself. Like, not only do you not get this, what would have been an 8-point play for Burrow, you lose points on the interception. Come on, man.
Yeah.
That was a tough one. And not Chase's finest hour this season for sure. So.
And I assume, though, with all that, you had him 7th in your rest of season rankings. We're not dropping him like a stone or anything like that, right?
Not too far, but I might drop him a little, and just because I think there should not be a huge gap between him and Higgins. Like, Chase and Higgins should not be separated by 20 ranking spots. It should be a little closer than that. So it might be something like Chase 10, Higgins 20, something like that.
That's fair. Yeah, you had him 7 and 23, so the gap is closing, and I think that is fair as well. And again, I'm a guy who has been too low on Higgins since he went MIA a little bit for a while, but I think almost I forgot just how good the guy is, and it's great to see him getting even more involved right now. So I agree with you. The gap certainly should be closed. Let's go to the Rams 37, Jaguars 7. This is what everybody wants to talk about, Pat. Everybody in the chat has been asking about this since we got here. And it is what happens now with the Rams backfield. So, you had Darrell Henderson active, but there was at least the report that he was going to have a very limited role here. So hopefully managers who were holding out with both were able to start Michel, because Henderson, I don't believe he played a single snap in the game. He was the emergency back, and Sony Michel looked good in a matchup that you can exploit. 24 for 121 on the ground with a touchdown, 4 targets, 3 catches, 8 yards. All right, Pat, they're both healthy. Does this change anything in how you view Henderson going forward, or just the backfield split?
I'm going to be a little bit more reserved in the way I rank him, just in case Sean McVay decides to preserve Henderson now that he has started to have some health issues, and he's had some health issues in the past, and not the biggest guy, and he was shouldering an enormous workload for quite a while this season. So maybe we see more of a rotation going forward. I mean, don't you think that's a possibility with Michel looking this good? Like, there was one run, it was kind of an outside run to the right today where like I saw Georgia Sony Michel on that run. Like he looked quick. Like that's the guy I saw. I mean, still not much involvement in the passing game. There were a couple real low value catches today, but yeah, I mean, he looked good, and I would not be surprised if he got more change of pace work or something. Yeah, maybe not like the Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson situation now, but something where we see a little bit more Michel usage and they dial back on Henderson a bit.
I would not be surprised, Pat, if you're right, probably not exactly like the Patriots, but closer to it. I think this is what McVay wants. He doesn't want the one guy. I think Henderson sort of forced that by how good he was for so long in the season. But now that Michel is like fully involved, obviously, in the team, because remember, he did sign on with the team very close. It takes a while to learn, even for a running back, to learn sort of that system. Now that he's there, he's perfectly capable. You've got Henderson banged up. I do expect this to sort of, for them to cannibalize each other a little bit. It's good for real life football. It's going to make it tougher for fantasy. In the one hand, I think the fantasy managers can probably gain a flex play in Sony Michel, but Henderson's value, I think, really is going to take a hit after this. Again, of the two, Henderson, I prefer him going forward, certainly, but I do think that they are going to both factor in here on a weekly basis. So that is something I think fantasy managers should keep in mind. Meanwhile, Matthew Stafford throws 3 touchdown passes, 1 each, to Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Beckham. Kupp, 10 targets, 8 catches, 129 yards. Jefferson, 8 targets, 6 catches, 41 yards, and Beckham, 5 targets, 2 catches, 28 yards. Pat, any takeaways here from the Rams? I mean, I know we get a lot of questions. I'm sure you do as well on Beckham and Jefferson. So any takeaways there for either of those guys?
No, we kind of talked about this last week, Dan, about how we both like Jefferson more than Beckham. I think we were sort of, vindicated by the way the target distribution went today, although Beckham did look good on the touchdown catch, kind of a classic Beckham high point falling away on a end zone fade type of pass. And he looked good, but I still would rather have Jefferson than Beckham in this offense for sure.
I agree with that as well. For the Jaguars, just James Robinson fumbled early and then I guess got benched for, a quarter or two or something like that. And so Carlos Hyde does score the touchdown. Robinson comes back, but just 35 total yards. Again, maybe it was partially the injury. He was obviously questionable coming in. Laquan Treadwell is your leading receiver, 4 catches, 62 yards. I don't really ever want to talk about Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault, Pat. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. Anything that you want to talk about here from the Jaguars side?
No, just that I think we shouldn't be too concerned about Robinson. I'd like to believe that it was less about the fumble and more about the heel thing. And not a great matchup next week for him with Tennessee, but after that, Houston and the Jets. Critical matchup. So hopefully, James Robinson is fully healthy by then and can take advantage.
I think you're giving Urban Meyer too much credit. I feel like he saw a fumble and he wanted to get rid of that guy, right? He almost cut him right in the middle of the game. But I think let's hope so. And again, I agree. Long term, I'm not concerned about Robinson. Washington football team 17, Raiders 15. We talked about Antonio Gibson already. Taylor Heineke throws for 196 and 2 touchdowns. One goes to Logan Thomas, who, of course, as we have mentioned now on the show, unfortunately, looks like he has torn his ACL and will be out for the year. John Bates stepped in after that. We'll see if Ricky Seals-Jones gets healthy. And the other one goes to Gibson, as we said. But let's talk about Terry McLaurin, who a lot of people are also asking about, Pat, a guy who I have probably an irrational love for. I keep waiting for it. It's just not really coming here. 5 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards receiving. What are your overall thoughts on Terry McLaurin?
Just continued frustration that I like him nearly as much as you do, Dan, but Washington just does not make many deep throws outside the hashes. Like they just don't do that much. It seems like they have like 5 of those throws a game, and they basically all go to McLaurin, except there was a nice Logan Thomas completion down the left sideline at one point. Yeah, I mean, it's just he is not getting enough high value targets, I think, for him to really pay off as I think he could in a different type of offense.
So you had him 12th, Pat, rest of season. And I know it's weird saying rest of season at this point because we've got a few weeks left and it's going to be matchup dependent. But generally speaking, like he's not a wide receiver 1 for you anymore, right?
No, wide receiver 2, mid-range to lower end, even wide receiver 2.
I agree. I'm moving him down as well. Again, I had him 14th, so I was right there with you. But I am going to move him down for the Raiders. Kenyon Drake leaves early. I saw you tweeting about this, Pat. Kenyon Drake left early with the foot injury. Jacobs looked kind of gimpy, especially early on, but he gets a lot of work here. 13 for 52 on the ground with the touchdown. 9 targets, 9 catches for 38 yards through the air. So if Jacobs is out, and again, they were already without Jalen Richard, who was on the COVID list. I mean, does this boost Josh Jacobs' stock significantly here?
Oh yeah, he's the only game in town now. I mean, it's like Ari Ingold, Alec Ingold,
yes.
Alec Ingold. I should know this, ex-Badger.
It's okay.
So yeah, like if and I was worried that Jacobs was hurt the play before Drake.
Yep.
It did look like he was like holding his, a groin injury, a hamstring injury, something. And no, he came back and looked fantastic after that. So, and we have talked about his greater involvement in the passing game of late. Like he's consistently been around. Coming into this game, he'd been like around 20 yards receiving for like 5 or 6 straight games. And he had 9 catches today? Am I thinking of someone else?
Let me look it up here. Sorry. 9 catches. Yes. Sorry. 9 targets, 9 catches. Yeah.
That's got to be like a career high, I would think, for Jacob so far. So for him to get that sort of usage in the passing game, like he's going to be flirting with running back 1 value next week, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty awesome to see. And again, Derek Carr just wasn't really pushing it. I don't know whether or not it had to do with Darren Waller being out. He throws for 249 yards. I know, Pat, it's funny. I was talking about it with Matt Peral today. You, I believe in your article, me independently before I'd ever read your article, and Matt Peral, our Betting Pros podcast, we're all on the Derek Carr over 266.5 passing yards, right? And almost got it with that late, throw down there to the end zone. But yeah, it just wasn't really working for them in the passing game. I mean, Hunter Renfrow, though, again, 10 targets, 9 catches, 102 yards. I was high on Foster Moreau. We talked about that. He only had the 1 catch, I believe, for 32 or 34 yards. So just not a lot working for that offense. I don't know if there's much to say about it, Pat. I mean, I don't know if it was the Waller injury or what, but it certainly didn't look that great today.
No, I do think we have to start Renfrow pretty much every week now. That's 2 big games for him in a row. Yep. He also had a big game on Thanksgiving. So, like, especially in PPR, he is he catches, like, he has such a high catch percentage. And like, it's not like these are just little 4 or 5 yard catches. I mean, these are actually, he's averaging like 11 or 12 yards a catch. So has to play, I think.
Man, he was definitely a contender for, I'm confused by your opinion, sir, with it, because you had him 37th rest of season. That's pretty low. I mean, considering what he was looking. So I assume he'll be moving up then.
After he's going to be like at least 28, 29, I would think.
28, which is exactly where I had him. A good spot to be in, Pat. I may move him up, though, just to make sure I'm slightly ahead of you. Steelers 20, Ravens 19. Great game, as they always are. And, the going for 2 at the end just made it kind of even more exciting if that was possible. Najee Harris just sort of is very typical, inefficient, but ultimately productive day. 21 for 71 on the ground, 5 targets, catches all of them, 36 yards through the air. Deontay Johnson, monstrous performance here, 11 targets, 8 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Chase Claypool here, Pat, a guy, I liked again, and I probably just based on the people who were around him was recommending him more than I sort of expected to. 3 targets, 2 catches, 52 yards. Now, he didn't play that many snaps in this one, Pat. Like, he was clearly running like lower than he usually is. I'm not sure if it was because of the injury, but general thoughts on Claypool, who making Mike Tomlin mad with his comments about music and stuff at practice, and just generally not really producing that much. What are your thoughts on Claypool here?
Yeah, I do wonder if the turf toe is bothering him. I do
Yeah.
think he played fewer snaps than Ray McLeod today.
Correct.
So, yeah, disappointing. And man, like a guy like that, a vertical receiver, or at least a guy who should be a vertical receiver playing with Ben Roethlisberger, it's just going to be frustrating. And yeah, it's just been up and down. Like it seems like most games, not really today, he does have a couple of big catches, and it just kind of didn't happen for him today. So, yeah, he's going to be in that like wide receiver 3 or beyond it purgatory probably for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Meanwhile, Pat Freiermuth kind of, quiet today. I think he caught the 2-point conversion, but 3 catches, 26 yards. Whatever. I refuse to say anything negative about Pat Freiermuth. For the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, 253 yards passing, has that late touchdown to Sammy Watkins. He adds on 55 yards rushing, but it's not that great overall. Devontae Freeman, 97 yards with the touchdown. That's great total yards. But, nobody really does anything. Pat, Hollywood Brown, 7 targets, 5 catches, 55 yards. Mark Andrews, 9 targets, 4 catches, 50 yards. Ravens offense has quietly looked a little broken of late. And again, Jackson was, he was dealing with the illness before last game. But I want to ask you about one specific guy, then bring up whatever you want. And that is Rashad Bateman, who's a guy who, again, comes up all the time. And a guy who I was really high on as he sort of started breaking out. 1 target, he had fewer snaps and fewer routes run than both Devin Duvernay and Sammy Watkins. I am highly concerned about him. I think we've got to move him down to the point where he's not really in this conversation of, do I start, Rashad Bateman or X receiver that's fairly reliable? I think he's definitely a step below that now.
Yeah, and it's weird because we had seen some promising signs from him, a few pretty acrobatic catches, a good catch percentage. It seemed like his yards per target numbers were decent. I'm not quite sure why he was running behind Duvernay and Watkins.
Yeah,
that's weird, especially since we have seen some very publicly terrible games for Watkins. And, for Bateman to be running behind him kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. And yes, that this offense does seem broken. Like I was thinking about this, it's almost like they're still struggling to replace Marshall Yanda. They haven't had their left tackle, Ronnie
Staley.
Ronnie Staley. Yeah, he's been hurt. It just, and they can't run the ball, Dan. Like it's
I know.
Constantly in bad down and distance situations. Another team that's facing a lot of 2nd and 9s, and it is not kind of the same. They don't have the same offensive mojo they had last year with Dobbins and the Gus bus, like losing those guys and having their offensive line take those hits, I think is just, it's been tough on Lamar.
Yeah, 7 sacks today. He's just been dealing with the pressure all the time, and it's really disrupting the offense. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they blitzed the hell out of him today.
Yeah.
Like they were bringing those blitzes off the corner, and like guys were getting these free running head starts at Lamar. So even if he wanted to like spin out and try to run for something, there was a guy who was already at full speed coming at him. And so he wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, no, it was tough really to watch. And their offense really has not looked that good. I will say also Marlon Humphrey sounds like he's going to be done for the year as well with an injury. Out of curiosity, Pat, real quick before we move on to the Seahawks 49ers, our last game. How do you feel about, you mentioned the running game. Obviously this is not what we saw, but Devontae Freeman looked pretty good. Again, he gets involved in the passing game and he does get the touchdown and 97 total yards. So you and I both had him right in that like borderline flex area right now. 34th for me, 35th for you rest of season. You going to move him up after this game?
I don't know about up. Maybe a little because he did, I think, outsnap let's say
Significantly.
Missouri by like something like a 4-1 margin today.
Yep.
So we might have to put him into more solid running back 2 territory.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling about him. Just because, again, that was really the question, but it was very clearly his show in this game. Seahawks 30, 49ers 23, another game that came down to the very, very end. What do you just think of Russell Wilson here, Pat? In this one, 30 for 37, 231, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Did he look better to you? Were you seeing signs of life here from Russell Wilson?
Yeah, the pick was totally on Gerald Everett too. I mean,
Correct.
that's another one that should have been a
Jamar Chase,
touchdown.
right?
Not
Yes.
quite as egregious as the Jamar Chase one, because this one only would have been like what, maybe an 8-yard, 7-yard touchdown. But
Right.
this one totally clanged off Everett and went right to someone. And on the very next play, Garoppolo gets tackled for a safety. So that was quite the
Yes.
interesting sequence.
Yeah.
The one thing missing from Russell Wilson's game, I kind of realized today, is like when he has that pass rush coming, you know how Russ always used to spin out one way or the other. And like
Yep.
he could always get away from that first guy. He's not getting away from the first guy at all. And it's just been this organizational ethos of these Seahawks having a crappy offensive line and thinking they can, make lemonade out of lemons on the offensive line, and they just can't do it. And Russ can't escape the pressure like he used to. And like that was a big part of it in the past, that they had this magician escape artist Houdini back there. So it didn't matter if like some of these guys were leaky with their protection. It matters now because Russ isn't, not as young as he used to be, and he's not escaping these guys. So I think that's kind of a problem. He did look a little bit better with his throws though today. His ball placement was better, and he was just more accurate generally.
Yeah, it has been something beyond just the fact that his accuracy has been off. Like, I don't know, his decision making, everything just looks a little slow right now with him. But again, the receivers here: Tyler Lockett 8 targets, 7 catches, 68 yards with the touchdown. FantasyPros favorite D. Eskridge finds the end zone, 35 yards and touchdown. DK Metcalf not great, but 8 targets, 5 catches, 60 yards. I do want to talk about the running backs, though, very briefly here, Pat. I mean, Travis Homer has 80 yards and the touchdown, plus 73 of those yards, and the touchdown came on the fake punt early on. So other than that, Adrian Peterson does find the end zone, of course, because he's Adrian Peterson, but just 11 carries for 16 yards. Rashad Penny, though, 10 for 35 on the ground. He does have 1 catch for 27 yards. Alex Collins was inactive here. Any thoughts on the running game? Can any of these guys be someone that fantasy managers can start with even relative confidence?
I mean, like Rashard Penny is back on the radar, maybe as like
Yeah.
a stash just in case they decided to commit to him. But like, I don't trust any of these guys, Dan. I mean, once Adrian Peterson gets somewhere, an organization feels compelled to give him 8 carries, 10 carries, 12 carries a game, like for at least a month until they realize he can't do it. Well, by the time that month expires, we're going to be done with the fantasy season. So
Right.
really hard to invest here. I don't think you can do it.
I'd love to see Penny get some run. He does look good at times, but obviously he's just had such trouble staying healthy. For the 49ers, 299 yards and 2 touchdowns with 2 picks for Garoppolo. Both touchdowns go to George Kittle, who has just that game that fantasy managers have been waiting for. 12 targets, 9 catches, 181 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk, Pat, another guy who sort of came up, no Deebo Samuel, 6 targets, 3 catches, 55 yards. A lot of that also came late, in the game. It was very uninvolved early. Any concerns or just overall thoughts here on Ayuk?
Yeah, it was just the Kittle game. And Ayuk showed up at least. It wasn't just a total bomb. So I'm not too concerned about that. Yeah, Kittle, just a dominant performance today. He's
The best.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I mean,
love it.
I ranked Kittle ahead of Darren Waller before the season. I know Waller's been hurt, but Waller also played a lot of games where he was pretty unimpactful. And that's kind of I don't know. I just feel like Kittle for the last 3 years coming into this year, he'd averaged 10 yards per target, which speaks volumes about the kind of player he is, and just a monster once he has the ball in his hands. Like besides Derrick Henry, the toughest guy to tackle in the league. I'm convinced of it.
Do you think, out of curiosity, that his heavier involvement in the passing game had to do with Debo being down? Because he's been blocking a ton,
Yeah,
Pat. So the question then remains, rest of season. Not that it matters. You have George Kittle. You're starting George Kittle.
right.
But I think it's worth talking about whether or not when Debo does come back, which could be next week, obviously it's a 1 to 2 week injury, whether or not you think that, Kittle's going to stay in a block more and be less of a factor in the passing game.
I hope not. I mean, I would love to see him be consistently impactful in the passing game like this, but who knows, Dan? Like, that's a big part of it, and it stinks that with our game, fantasy, that Kittle's proficiency as a blocker actually hurts him in the part of in the one phase of the game that matters to us. That's the bummer about fantasy. Sometimes
it hurts you, Pat, but I am in an all blocking grade fantasy league. So Kittle is rocking the house in that one. Meanwhile, before we go, Elijah Mitchell, 84 total yards, 25 touches with the score. He's great. He left briefly. He came back in. Looks like he's fine. He is just, an RB1, no questions asked. That's going to do it for today's show. Remember, go to Organifi.com/FantasyPros. Use code FantasyPros for 20% off your order as you get healthier every single day. Thanks also to Pristine Auction. Go to pristineauction.com. See all the great memorabilia that is up for auction every single day. PRISTINE auction.com. And again, $5 in free credits if you use our code FantasyPros in the registration field. Finally, thanks to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/FP. Get a 20% deposit match up to $500 on your first deposit and get a free 6-month subscription to Fantasy Pros. Thank you, everybody who tuned in live with us. About 200 people were here with us, talking amongst themselves, asking some questions. We appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe, like this video, all that good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back tomorrow, as always, on Monday with our Waiver Wire show. I will talk to you then.